Hello and welcome to the Truths from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 22. Today I'm joined by John Mulligan of Wicked Tree Gear and Arrow Wild Company. We're talking deer hunting, of course, trimming shooting lanes, and cop stories from John's former life, and much, much more. So stay tuned. All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Truths from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, and I'm your host, Clint Campbell. Today I'm joined by a good buddy of ours named John Mulligan. John is from the Wicked Tree Gear Company, and he also has a side project. I don't know if I would necessarily refer to it as a side project at the moment, but a company or project called Arrow Wild Company that is online. I met John at the Harrisburg Outdoor Show, and we struck up a great conversation. I'd really been looking forward to having him on the show. He's got some fantastic stories, not just related to deer hunting, but John has an interesting past and kind of took an interesting route to get into the outdoor industry, and we'll kind of dive into all those details. He has a lot of knowledge when it comes to trimming trees and kind of cutting in shooting lanes and so forth. And it kind of speaks well to this time of year, as it's a great time of year to kind of get out and start kind of taking care of some of those spring cleanup duties, as I like to call them. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess the weather has really kind of shifted, which I'm absolutely loving at the moment. I'm able to get out and really kind of shoot my bow a lot more and kind of start dialing in for the fast approaching fall. But I will admit that I am well behind in my spring cleanup duties. I've got a lot of food plots to put in and not a lot of time, and a lot of turkey hunting to do too here that's fast coming up. I was just going over my schedule for April and May with my wife yesterday, and realized that I have pretty much every weekend chocked full of some type of outdoor obligation. I'm not going to complain about it. It just means that there's going to be a lot of work to do here in the next 2 months to kind of get all my turkey hunting in and get all my spring/summer food plots sprayed, anything that's a perennial, and kind of start making my plans for my fall plots. Because as I mentioned, I believe in the past, or at least I've wrote about it on the blog, my dad picked up a recent property. He lives in North Carolina and been itching to kind of get a place back up here in Pennsylvania where he could do some hunting. And he picked up a piece, and so I'm kind of helping him, kind of think about what we might want to put in for food plots and what we want to do, which is great. Just adds to the growing list of spring chores that I have. But we'll manage to get through it. We always do, and looking forward, of course, to the how those things will pan out when it comes this fall and deer season. So we'll put the work in now, and hopefully it'll pay dividends in the later. But I'm not going to belabor too long here. I want to make sure we jump into the conversation with John, but just note that today we are going to be announcing the winner of the second Exes trail camera giveaway. I'll, of course, announce that at some point here during the podcast, and once we announce that name, we'll make sure to get the information of the folk of the gal or guy who won the Exes trail camera and get that shipped out to them as soon as possible. But before we dial John in, let's take a quick break to hear a word from our partners at Whitetail Institute with the Whitetail Institute Food Plot Tip of the Week. Today, we'll hear a few thoughts and tips for food plot placement and design.
Well, first of all, you look at how much property you have. And if you don't have a lot of property, just plant what you have, because anything you can to get the deer coming to your property is going to be a good thing. If you've got the room and the different terrain features and woods in different places, you can put some more design into it. Your point is to try to make the food plot as attractive to deer during daylight hours as you can. And I know it sounds trite, but think like a deer. What would you feel more comfortable walking out in? As you get something that's big and fat and wide and open, it's probably not going to be able to give them a feeling of safety as much as one that's, say, long and narrow. You also want to, if you can, again, try to place it right up against cover or in cover, so that a deer using the plot can feel like it has the option just to jump back in the cover and be out of visibility real quickly. That's another thing that does well. Another thing that will help is to maximize how much what we call linear edge, which is basically anywhere that the food plot itself, the planting, butts up to cover that is real or perceived cover. And by real, I mean something like a big thicket. Perceived would be something, a few rows of standing corn, something that just breaks up the deer's outline enough to where it feels like it can see danger approaching before the danger sees it. Also, you need to take into account how you're going to get in and out of the stand when you're hunting near or on the food plot. You want to have approaches that will get you to your stand and also place the stand, a couple of stands in different places based on commonly prevailing wind direction. You want to make your primary approach, if you can, by the most commonly prevailing direction, of course, which is down here in Alabama. It's usually out of the northwest. But if you can have another way in that will let you take advantage of the plot and hunt it during a different wind direction.
And that, folks, is the Whitetail Institute Food Plot Tip of the Week. It is certainly food plot season, so be sure to head over to whitetailinstitute.com to check out all their products. And if you're considering fall plots, you may want to look at their new Imperial Whitetail Beets and Greens. This is a new product release that contains a blend of kale, turnips, radishes, and sugar beets. This type of forage is ideal for early fall through late winter to help the deer through those hard winter months. And now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get John Mulligan / Johnny Utah on the line. All right, welcome back to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 22. Today on the show, I am joined by a buddy of mine by the name of Johnny Utah. This is not by the way of Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves' Point Break, Johnny Utah. This is the Whitetail Johnny Utah. Some of you may know him as John Mulligan of Wicked Tree Gear, Arrow Wild Company. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe he did some work with the White Knuckle Production folks at one point in his whitetail career as well. But John, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. And how you doing, man?
Hey, well, first, thanks for having me, and doing good, man. How's it going?
It's going okay. I know we were just chatting a little bit before we started recording the work endeavors. You know, I spent some time away from my normal day job to visit some clients, and it's like every time I come back, it's no one tends to do the work that I typically have to do while I'm in the office. So I come back to a pile.
Yeah. Yeah. I told somebody the other day, I'm like, you put in a vacation request and you come back, and it's really not a vacation because all that work you still have to catch up on, and plus your new work that gets dumped on your plate. So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know, man. Every time I kind of schedule a hunt or to go somewhere, it's like I'm taking off for a week or whatever. I'm always sitting there wondering if all the work I have to put in the week before I go on vacation is worth the week that I'm going to spend on vacation or not. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
You got to pay to play, I guess, as the old saying goes. But
oh yeah.
Yeah, so I know you and I got to run into each other at the Harrisburg show for a little while, and I know that was the first time we had formally met in person. Had a blast hanging out and chatting with you, and I know we got to know each other a little bit, and I got to learn a bit about your background. But for those out there listening that maybe aren't as familiar with who you are, what you do, and where you're from, and so forth, if you could just give us a little background on where you're from and what you're doing in the whitetail world these days.
So for me, I started out hunting out of Kentucky, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth on. And like a lot of guys, I started out rifle hunting, and that's what my buddies were doing at the time. And so we started out doing a little bit of rifle hunting, and then I eventually got into bow hunting, kind of seeking more of a challenge. My background is kind of strange. I have a degree in horticulture. Did that for a while. Had some landscape companies. And then I became a police officer. One of my next door neighbors, he was a cop, and he just had more interesting stories than I did, And so I kept talking to him one day, and I said, your stories are just kind of cool. And he's like, well, why don't you go be a cop? And I said, I don't know. Like, isn't that one of those professions, like your dad had to be a cop or something? And he's like, no, it's not like that, So I did it, and I moved away from Lexington, Kentucky, up to northern Kentucky, and that's where I was a police officer at. And started. Actually, I met my old business partner from Wicked. I actually met him at a deer and turkey show at the Ohio show, and I really liked at the time it was a handsaw. I ended up bought a handsaw, and I really liked it. We got to talking a little bit, and I ended up becoming a dealer, actually, for Wicked Tree Gear for a little while, and was just selling them to landscape companies. And it was better than anything that I was using in the landscape world at the time and stuff. And then he actually approached me about doing some white knuckle filming and things. And my first thought was, I don't really want to, when I'm hunting, I just kind of want to hunt. I don't know if I want to take that on with filming and things like that. But I got into it, and I kind of like sharing stories, and I like seeing other people's, I guess, success and failures. You know what I mean? And
right.
These are everyday struggles that we all deal with and things like that. And I think if you put it out there in a cool way, it's kind of neat, and I kind of got to doing that. Fast forward, I ended up becoming one of the owners of Wicked Tree Gear, and we recently sold the company about a little over a year ago. But I'm still vice president of the company, still very much involved in the company. And then I recently started Air Wild Company, web show on Facebook, and put together a pretty cool group of guys that are like-minded guys that are just, we don't want anything handed to us. It's kind of do-it-yourselfer guys that want to get out there, and it's kind of sharing our stories almost like if we were sitting around deer camp.
Right.
And just trying to share that kind of stuff. So that's how I kind of got all wrapped up into all this stuff.
Nice. So, I mean, prior to getting with the white knuckle folks, were you doing any filming prior to that, or was it just more of like, hey, I should try this out?
Yeah. No, I wasn't doing any of it at all. And somebody said, hey, would you ever want to film a hunt, film one of your hunts? And I thought, man, sometimes it seems like it's hard enough just doing it without a camera. I don't know if I'm up, I'm up for that kind of a challenge. I feel a little too much pressure, and it was a little bit of pressure. Like with anything, if you do it enough, you find ways to work around it. And I've always said I'm a hunter first and a filmer second.
Right.
I know guys that are so dedicated to the craft that they're like, I won't shoot that deer unless I know that it's on camera.
Right.
Well, I didn't get into the hunting world as a camera operator, So for me, it's always been, I'm a hunter first, and if I capture it on film, great. But I'm there for the hunt, first and foremost.
Right. Yeah. I started filming, hold on, let me back up for a second. I started trying to film. Let me put it that way. Probably 2 seasons ago, and I've not been successful getting anything on camera yet. It seems like every time I've had a shot opportunity, it's just happened so quickly that I didn't even have a chance to turn my camera on. That was how the deal was this year that I took. I didn't even have an opportunity to. If I would have turned my camera on, I would have absolutely missed the shot. And I'm the same way, kind of what you were saying, which is, I kind of took the approach this year when I take my cameras out. I kind of tell myself, when I'm going out, I'm either going to be there to try to film something, or I'm going to be there to try to shoot something. And I make that kind of determination before I even get to my stand. That way there's no second guessing when I'm in the tree stand and end up taking a bad shot or rushing a shot or whatever the case is. So,
well, and I take it you were self-filming too, then, right?
Yeah, I was self-filming. I usually take just a small, handheld camera, and then one action camera is usually what I'll take. And this year, toward the end of the season, I did take a DSLR out for a couple trips to the woods. Didn't get anything within bow range, but I did start taking a DSLR with me, which I love the quality. And it's just, if anyone out there is just doesn't feel like they're being challenged enough bow hunting, take a DSLR camera into the stand with you on manual focus. And
exactly.
Yeah, and see how that ups the game.
Yeah, exactly. And and that's the thing. This past year in Iowa, that was the first year that I had actually captured a bow hunt of mine self-filming. And I'll be honest, I don't like it.
Right.
There is that cool factor that you're out there on your own and you have to do it all on your own. But if you're really wanting to tell a story and you're really wanting to capture that moment, it's really, really tough to do. And the guys that are dedicated self-filmers, hats off to those guys, because there's some guys that are doing it very, very well. And I don't think I ever will be able to do it like that.
Right. It's one of those things where if you almost have to kind of decide what type of story you're trying to tell, right? Is it more just like the quick, 5 minutes, or 3 minute, A to B, this is the situation, this is the moment in the stand, this is the shot opportunity, this is the shot, and then the recovery. which
right.
to me, it's like, I kind of enjoyed that kind of approach. Then there's the other side of the self-filmer where it's like, you're really trying to tell more of a I don't want to say an elaborate story, but just a more in-depth story, which then kind of requires you to start picking up B-roll and stuff like that, which that was the part that I just don't think I had the patience for. I think whenever I first started, I was trying to do too much.
Sure. Oh, it's, and I think everybody that kind of gets into it, I mean, let's face it, we see what somebody else has done, or we saw what was done on television, and you say, all right, if I'm going to start filming, then I want to recreate, and I want to do something as good as what I saw. And in reality, there's a lot of those film crews that they may have two guys up in the tree, or there may be a guy on the ground and a guy on the tree, in the tree filming over the shoulder. And those guys are in their practice, they're in their craft, and they've perfected it, and they have all the bugs worked out. I know that first year I don't know exactly how long this battery is going to last on this camera. I don't know what the audio settings are going to pick up, what it's not going to pick up. And sometimes you're looking on that little viewfinder. Is it in focus or is it not? And then you don't find out till you get it home, and you're like, well, that was a wasted day of filming because everything was out of focus. And
right, or you get that nasty sun glare.
And I've transitioned over to DSLRs. What's that?
I said, or you get that nasty sun glare off your little viewfinder, and everything looks black, and so you're just kind of winging it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so, and the cool thing, I guess, with being involved with Wicked and getting into the filming is I've got to meet so many awesome people that are just super genuine people that love the sport, and they love putting out quality videos and production work, that I've been able to, tap into some of their resources as far as they've learned over the years. Mm-hmm. And I've had so many people that, help me along the way, like, hey, you want to use this camera setting, and you want to use this camera setting if you're doing pictures, and, you want to use a flash on outdoor photography sometimes, and you just kind of learn that stuff. And some of it's trial and error, but I love having buddies that can teach me something.
Yeah, no, I know. That's you always have to have those good friends that have sharper skills in certain areas than yourself. And I will say, man, like, the photos that you post, you have quite an eye, at least in my opinion. I always enjoy whenever you're posting photos, seeing what you're coming up with next, because it's always got a nice aesthetic, if you will.
Oh, thank you. It's one of my really good friends, Jeremy Myers. He takes really, really good photos, super, super clean, sharp photos. There's another friend of mine, Kyle Green. I've picked his brain, buddy Kyle Reindeers. And a lot of these guys, they kind of gave me some pointers in the beginning, and then they said, look, eventually you'll kind of develop your own style, and it's almost like you're watermarking your photos without putting a watermark on it. You'll edit a certain way, right, or there'll be a certain style theme of photos that you personally like to take, and it'll become very noticeable. So I took information that they said, and, you try to use some of their settings and some suggested settings and things like that, and you try to edit in Lightroom a certain way. And then now fast forward, and and I've had opportunities to hang out with guys like Jordan Gill and Matt McCormick and Sam Soholt, Matt Zinger, and those guys. And there's so many guys out there that are doing just amazing work that I don't think I'll ever obtain. That's kind of the word, like golf. They say golf's a game you can never master. I think photography is a game that you'll never master, because there's just so many talented people out there that you're kind of chasing and trying to, do what they can do.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's unfortunately for me, I don't know that the camera gene, if you will, runs deep in me necessarily. My wife, anytime we go on vacation, I'm not allowed to have the camera. I take I take possibly the world's worst pictures.
No.
Yeah. So I have the DSLR now, so I'm trying. I did take some family photos, which actually turned out really, really well, which she was happy with. But I don't know. I like it. It's fun, so I'll keep trying. But you did mention this year was the first year that you had one of your films on, or one of your hunts captured on film, a harvest, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So how was?
And it wasn't and I'll tell you, it wasn't one of those situations where I started the season and I said, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself even more, because let's face it, bow hunting is challenging enough as it is.
Right.
I didn't set out and say, I'm going to challenge myself to self-film. It was just by nature. I moved away from Kentucky to Iowa, and I left my buddy Mike Riddle. Mike Riddle is my hunting buddy back in Kentucky, and became my camera guy for the last 3 years. And when I moved away, with his work schedules, he wasn't able to come up. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to have to start self-filming a little bit more. And it just so happened that the day that I ended up shooting my buck in Iowa, this was my first bow buck for Iowa. I was there in a tree by myself, and that's just the way it worked out.
Nice, man. That's awesome. So that was so how did that compare to the deer you've taken, where you previously lived in Kentucky?
The buck that I shot in Iowa this year is not my biggest buck, but there's a sense of accomplishment by being able to take that deer. I've been trying to get to Iowa for several years, and like a lot of guys in the whitetail world, I mean, everybody has their home states, and your home state's always going to be special to you. Mm-hmm. And for me, Iowa, Kansas, those were two states that offered an age class of deer that I wanted to chase. It's not that I was bored of hunting deer in Kentucky, and I know that there's old deer in Kentucky. They're definitely, but in the properties and the locations that I had, there's a lot. I mean, your average deer was your 3-year-old buck, right. And I wanted to come to a place where there was basically more deer than humans, in a sense,
Right.
And Southeast Iowa offered that. I had an opportunity to move out here, and it gave me that opportunity to chase that age class of deer that I wanted. And so even though my Iowa deer wasn't my biggest, it's probably my greatest accomplishment because of what that deer represented, that I got to put a resident Iowa archery tag on that buck.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. So, I was actually on the Iowa outdoor things DNR website yesterday, looking at getting my next preference point. So I would love to be able to wrap a resident tag around an antler one day.
For sure. It's when I moved here, I ended up losing 3 preference points. I wish they'd allow you to donate those to somebody, but
right.
One of my buddies, I made the comment. I said, "Oh man," I said, I'm losing 3 non-resident preference points," and he's like, "Yeah, but now you're a resident, and you can hunt. You can get 3 bow bucks if you want." But so I guess there's bigger problems. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, it was just so cool. It was funny because, I mean, that deer was a giant to me. And I think the more and more I hunt, the size of the deer doesn't matter as much to me, antler-wise. The age class or the body of the deer or what challenge was involved kind of means more. And I knew that it was really cool when I was able to take that deer, and of course capture it on film, and I was by myself and everything. And it was in a spot that I was able to pick out on a map, and I did a run and gun set there a couple of weeks prior. But until I put that resident tag on it, it was like that was when that sense of accomplishment kind of sunk in. Like, wow, I made it. This is what I set out to do. Leaving the law enforcement career behind and making this big leap of faith to come out to Iowa. And it's like, wow, I accomplished what I set out to do.
That's awesome, man. I mean, was this a buck you had any history with? Did you have him on game camera? Were you kind of following him, or did you just know there were some good deer in that area and you were kind of setting up on good deer?
Yeah. That's, there was actually a couple of hit list bucks that were in that area that I was really targeting. And this deer came in and it struck me. I looked at him. He was a solid 4-year-old deer, and he actually walked away. And talking about the whole self-filming thing and capturing things on hunts, I kind of fell into a trap where I was so busy filming this deer and zooming in and kind of following as he moved through the woods, and he was interacting with a smaller buck. And I was just enjoying the moment that when I panned back out, I'm like, wow, he's 70 yards away now. I'm like, he was right there at 20 yards. I could have, moved the camera to the side, and I could have reached for my bow and had a shot at him. And I kind of told myself, I thought, well, there's another missed opportunity at a cool deer. And I said, if he comes back, I'm gonna take that deer. And about 20 minutes later, it was starting to get into that moment where it's like, well, I got about 5 minutes left. And I see antlers pop back, into range. And I'm kind of like talking and kind of coaching the deer along. I'm like, buddy, you better hurry up or it's going to get too dark on me, But he eventually came in and gave me a broadside quartered away shot. And I was, fortunately I was able to hit him good. And I was using my Luminox. And I knew that I hit him good and I could see where my impact was. Followed him a little bit. And while I was actually doing my kind of a post shot interview, you can actually hear him crash in the woods. So that was kind of cool. And you kind of get all the cool feels, kind of hit you. It all becomes, it's all surreal. It's like it just happened. Right. It actually just happened.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite sounds in the woods. It's you know what I mean? It's like, well, let me put it this way. It's one of my favorite sounds after I let an arrow go.
There you go. Yeah,
the other sound is like what is falling from up above me that makes me a little bit nervous, or did I climb the wrong tree in the dark? I climbed the dead one next to the one I was supposed to climb, which is always not a good feeling.
Or it's a ring tree that you didn't know about. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That could be bad.
Yeah. So the land that you're hunting out there, you of course moved. Are you hunting, or do you own the land that you're hunting? Are you knocking on doors to get access? What's the situation with where you're hunting?
I own a little bit of personal ground. I was able to put a few food plots on this year, and I also picked up permission to hunt some ground next to a piece of public. And the beauty of that was I could hunt that private piece, but it also gave me awesome access into the public on the backside that no one else has access to.
That is
cute. At least if they want access to that, they got to put on the hiking boots and they might have a mile walk in or something, and a lot of guys, on average aren't willing to do that, especially walking in with climbers or something like that. So, that was actually, I actually shot that buck on public this year. Nice. And so that was another first. I'd never taken a buck on public ground before. I'd always hunted. The public ground in Kentucky is not really that great. Right. Public ground in Iowa is I would say is overlooked. I think really? the norm is, it's like all the other states. I bet public ground's got a ton of hunters on it and it's overpressured and things like that. In Iowa, some of the chunks of ground are 2, 3, 4, 5,000 acres. And I ran 30-something trail cameras in public this year and never got a picture of another human. And I ran cameras for 6 months.
Wow. That's awesome.
So it worked out.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was literally just having this internal conversation with myself and actually with another buddy of mine who actually lives in Iowa. Because I've been buying, I bought a preference point last year because last year was the first year that I was really like, I'm going to go ahead and start buying my points for Iowa because I want to go. This year, of course, I'm going to Montana, and it was one of those things where I was like, I'll start buying preference points in the year that I draw for Iowa. I won't go to Montana to elk hunt that year, and I'll just kind of have my, annual adventure hunt, and that year will just happen to be Iowa.
There you go.
And but I was starting to think to myself, I was like, I started looking at the zones and the draw statistics for, your first year, your 1 point, 2 point, it's et cetera, for all the different zones. And I started thinking to myself, should I hold out and try to draw, once every 4 years and come be able to hunt, zone 6 or zone 4, which I'm imagining zone 6 is probably really hard to even get access because I'm assuming it's probably pretty commercialized down there, or at least most of the ground's leased up and probably hard to get access if you're not from there or have a family member with a farm. Or zone 4, which would probably take me 4 years to draw. Or do I look at maybe some of the overlooked zones? I forget which zone it is, but it's up there near the border of Wisconsin, up there along the river. I can't remember which zone, number it is. I was like, or do I look like at an area like that I can probably draw every other year and get to hunt Iowa every year? So I'm curious, do you think there's a huge difference between the deer that are in that zone versus the deer that are in the southern zones?
Well, I mean, they had that big 222 that was not killed around me. Right. So, there's big bucks everywhere. Mm-hmm. We all know that. I think a lot of times you got to look at the zone and say, well, why is that such a hot zone? Is it truly because there's giant deer there? Or is it because that's where a lot of celebrity hunters live?
Right. Yeah.
So if they're living there, that must be where all the big bucks are. You know, I'm right on the Lee County, Van Buren County line, and both counties always produce big bucks. But if you go and at the end of the year and you look at the top bucks, it's all over the state. I mean, everywhere. I mean, sure, they might not kill one in downtown Des Moines or downtown Cedar Rapids, but other than that, I mean, there's big bucks all over the state. And so, yeah, I mean, there's certain zones that are tougher to draw. You know, Zone 6, there's a ton of public, ton of public. And I have buddies that, you know, they're like, I don't know if I want to put in for a license yet because I don't have anywhere to go. And I'm like, call me. I'll show you my map with my waypoints of, like, you know, hot spots that I've seen, you know, over this past season.
Right.
They're everywhere. I mean, it's in any of the zones you can kill a big deer. What I would do if you don't have access to a piece of private ground, start looking at where the large chunk of public is. I mean, the piece of public, I kept seeing the same truck. These guys from Michigan were in town this year hunting for 1 week. And after like the third day of seeing their truck, when I drove down the road, they're actually walking out of the timber. So I just pull up next to them. I'm like, hey, you know, how's it going, guys? You know, what are you seeing out there? Because I'm only hunting a mile away, and I'm curious what they're seeing versus what I'm seeing. And they said, well, my one buddy, he just shot a 170. And he shot this buck like a quarter mile from my house on public.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, wow, that's a stud. You know, that's a solid deer.
Right.
And he shows me a couple of their camera, you know, pictures of it. And then I reach for my phone and I scroll through my phone and I show him a trail camera picture of that buck that I had on my personal property back in the summer. So, no, there's big bucks. There's big bucks everywhere. And I would, if you have you don't live that far away, come up in the summer and walk a piece, you know, come check out a piece or whatever. And that's what they do. They told me, they said, hey, we came up in July and we hung out for a couple of days and scouted out a few spots. And then they came back in the fall and they both put tags on deer.
Yeah, man, that was kind of what I did with Ohio this year. I'm definitely down with hunting some public ground. You know, it's like that's kind of was my approach in Ohio this year. And I think, you know, for me, coming from where I hunt, you know, hunting in Pennsylvania where the deer aren't huge, right? I think anywhere in Ohio, just by comparison, is going to be, you know, I'm going to be excited by what I see. You know what I mean? So I think from that respect, it may be, you know, worth me looking into some of those zones where I might have an easier time drawing just so I can get out there more often. But, you know, not to switch gears here, but I wanted to, you know, I introduced you as Johnny Utah, right? Because I came to know you online as Johnny Utah, and gonna be honest here and kind of maybe give out a dirty little secret of mine. But Point Break was probably one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid. Like I was bound and determined to move to Hawaii because my aunt lived there at one point, and I was like, I'm gonna surf the rest of my life, and I'm going to be Keanu Reeves, and that's just all there was to it. So I thought we would just take a minute here because people always have interesting nicknames and it's interesting how they get them, but it's also interesting how our friends get nicknames. So I wanted to see, one, where did Johnny Utah come from? And are there any nicknames growing up of your friends that are odd or kind of interesting? And then I'll share one or two of mine as well. I won't put you on the hook for all of it.
Okay. So Johnny Utah came about. When I was a police officer, I also did a little bit of undercover narcotics work. And in the movie Point Break, you know, Keanu Reeves' character, his name is Johnny Utah, and he's undercover, you know, trying to catch Brody and those guys, right?
Yeah,
and,
the ex-presidents, man.
That's right. So basically, that's kind of how it came about. And, you know, obviously my first name's John, and my dad's name is Johnny. And growing up, a lot of people either called me Junior or they would just call me Johnny. And so anyways, one night somebody called me Johnny Utah, and it kind of just stuck. And I mean, I get mail addressed here to the house to Mr. Utah, and I get the Nigerian scam emails where they're like, "Oh, old man Utah died in like England, and we'll send you his inheritance of $2 million if you pay us $10,000 for the attorney fees." And it's just kind of crazy, but yeah. So it's that's how that got started. Back home, a bunch of buddies. I mean, we had some taters, and we had guys that were overweight that we called tiny,
right.
and stuff like that. I had a cousin. His name was Boots. That was kind of a funny name, and I never really knew why anybody called him Boots, but
Boots.
We just called him Boots.
Nice. So mine is my last name's Campbell. So so not super creative here, but my uncles were all nicknamed Soup, right? My dad was also Soup. My uncle, his brothers were Soup, but they were all just old enough, like apart from each other in age, to where they didn't have like necessarily the same group of friends, so they could all have the same nickname. So I ended up, when I was a kid as Little Soupy, like to my family. And then somehow my friends caught on to it, and then I forever became Soup all through high school. And then
I didn't know if you were going to tell me like you were Tomato Soup and Dad was Chicken Noodle,
right.
or
Yeah, they called me Tomato. Dad was Chicken, and Uncle Bill was Chunky Beef.
Okay, yeah.
Or Cream of Mushroom. I kind of like that one. That might be a good one. But I had a couple of friends with like my cousin. I don't know why we called him this. His name is Brandon, but we called him Buck, and I don't know why. Buck, just Buck. Yeah. And then there was another kid we called Pud, and he embraced that nickname, which is probably the worst nickname on the planet, actually. And then there was one. His name was Crazy Dave, and he earned that. He earned that honestly. Crazy. So yeah, there's not a whole lot to read into that one.
Crazy Dave.
Crazy Dave. Everyone has that one crazy friend where everyone kind of either you call it to his face, crazy his name, or it's the name everybody calls him when he's not around. But
and he's the guy that he's always the one at the party that says, "Hey, watch this."
Yeah, hey man, hold my beer, watch this one. Exactly. Yeah. It actually, truth be told, it's like in your former line of work, you may have run into this guy, and I wouldn't be surprised if that actually happened.
I might have arrested Crazy Dave.
You might have arrested Crazy Dave. So you mentioned earlier, you have your degree is in horticulture, if I'm not mistaken, and of course you were in law enforcement, so you've taken kind of an interesting path to get to working in the outdoor industry overall. So with your degree, right, in horticulture and where you kind of how you started out, like how I know your neighbor was a cop and you kind of had conversations with him about the business or that line of work, but what was that thing that made you go like, hey, I think I'm going to do this? Because you weren't just like the normal like, hey, I'm going to sit along and hit the traffic or the radar gun and pull some folks over for speeding. You were into some like nitty gritty stuff. So how did that all kind of like what kind of clicked and was like, yeah, I think this is be a good idea. I'd like to do this.
So like I said, I was working for a landscape company and, didn't really like where the company was going. The company was going to merge with another company and things were kind of getting moved around, shifted around. And, I think what kept me at that first landscape company was, the owner of the company. And he was kind of, at that time, it was kind of like an older brother, like a brother figure to me, kind of a mentor. And he taught me a lot about business and profit margins and how to keep customers happy and how to manage employees and that kind of stuff. And so when I saw that the company dynamics were kind of changing and shifting around, then of course I had that buddy that had those awesome stories, right?
Right.
And so I thought, you know what? I think I want to go do this. And I'll be honest, when I first decided that I was going to go be a cop, I was 22 years old. And honestly, I was like, I'm going to go do this for a couple years. I'm not going to make a career out of it, but how cool would it be to go to a police academy and, you get to drive a car and you carry a gun, you got a badge and you take people to jail. I mean, this is like every dude's dream job in a way, Right. I'm like, you get the high speed chases and foot chases. And this is just to be, I ate it up. And then after I'd been there, like, I guess I'd only been a cop for about a year. And I pulled over a guy one night. He had 312 pounds of weed in his car. And it turned out he was an escapee from Leavenworth. And, he was like talking about like the double jackpot. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. He's a stand-up fella.
Yeah. He was an honorable citizen.
Right.
So right after that, there was a position that opened up in a narcotics unit. a task force in the area, in that northern Kentucky, greater Cincinnati area. And I put my name in the hat, and I thought, I don't have a chance. And heck, I've only been a cop for a year. There's no way they're going to put a rookie in this. And they did. They ultimately did. And so I did that for a little while, had the different name and got to go undercover and do that kind of stuff, live that life for a while. And it was a ton of fun. And then I look back on it and I'm like, man, I'm at year 15 and a half, and I'm still doing this same job, the job that I said I was only going to do for a couple of years. But during that whole time, I also had started a landscape company in northern Kentucky, and I ran that kind of on my days off. And then I was selling saws at the time for Wicked, and then I was also filming some hunts for White Knuckle, and I try to stay busy, as you can tell.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so you had mentioned the kind of the crazy stories, and I wouldn't mind if there was one here that was crazy or good or just kind of particularly funny that you could share, because I'm always down for an interesting bad guy story.
So I kind of thought that this might come up, so I kind of put about one. And I had done another podcast, and the question came up, and I gave him a funny one, and I thought, all right, I got to think of it. I got to think of another good one. So the story I have for you, especially picked out for your podcast, is we were in Newport, Kentucky, and we were getting ready to raid a house. We had been buying narcotics inside the house, a lot of heroin and stuff. And so we were all, we had a couple of guys stacked up, full raid gear like you see on TV, and we've got the Ram, and we're knocking on the door with a search warrant. And of course, if they want to barricade and don't open up, then we've got that universal key that likes to take doors off the hinges, and we come on in. Well,
nice.
While we're stacked up, we go inside. We had a couple of guys on the outside of the house. We always have those guys as catchers. So in case somebody makes it out the window or tries to, dive off the roof, whatever, we've got chasers that can chase those guys. So we go inside, bust through, put handcuffs on a couple of people, and then we start doing our meticulous, search throughout the house. So I'm going back to the truck to take the Ram back to the truck and start grabbing evidence, collection kits and stuff. And I see one of my guys. He's outside of the house, and he's got somebody in handcuffs laying on the ground. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, you're not even going to believe this. I'm like, lay it on me. So he's perched up, standing next to a tree, kind of in the shadows, with a full raid gear vest on that says police, narcotics, everything, gun, badge, the whole 9 yards, okay? A guy comes bebopping down the street and is like, hey, buddy. So our agent's looking at him. He's like, what? Go away. Beat it, dude. We're getting ready to kick in a door. Right. I need to be paying attention. And this guy's like, hey, there's a bunch of cops getting ready to raid that house. So he's like, keep your voice down. He's like, you want to buy some crack? So he buys crack off the guy 10, 20 feet from where we're doing a raid inside this house. And then ends up arresting the guy like on the site. So I'm just, it takes all kinds of people. It was job security every day.
Man, that is like maybe quite possibly the worst drug dealer on the planet. Like,
hands down. It was not going to have a successful career at all.
He needed to find a different line of work pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So during this time, I mean, it sounded like you had a lot going on, but were you able to manage to squeeze in a fair amount of hunting time, or did you spend most of your time hunting bad guys at that point?
The whole time I was doing the narcotic stuff, I was just really starting to get into hunting a little bit. And when I first started hunting, like I mentioned earlier, I was just a rifle hunter. More of my friends, that's what they did. And one of my buddies had approached me and said, hey, he was another cop. He's like, let's do some deer hunting. And I'm like, dude, I don't know anything about deer hunting at all. Where I grew up in Lexington, Jessamine County area, there wasn't a lot of deer at that time. I mean, my dad would talk about we lived out in the country too. And I remember one day he comes home from work and he's like, I just saw a deer. I'm like, oh, a wow. Deer? You did? You saw one? It was like a cool thing. So, right. And a lot of our farm ground was all pasture ground. So there wasn't big timber. So it was all horses, cattle, tobacco, stuff like that.
Right.
None of the things that deer like. And so we didn't have a lot of deer around by us. But once I moved to northern Kentucky, there's a lot more big timber down there, river bottoms, and there's a larger whitetail population. And just as time went on, they talk about back in the 50s, you didn't see a whitetail deer. So as time went on, more and more deer had gotten into the area and whatnot. So he tells me, he says, let's do some hunting. So my approach is, well, I guess I'll get online and I'll read a little bit about what is deer hunting. My dad wasn't a hunter.
Right.
So I go to Walmart, buy some camo. I bought a Remington. Let's see. Oh, that was a 270. I bought a 270. That was my first deer hunting rifle. And I think I had like a Bushnell or a Simmons scope or something like that on it. And that's kind of how I got into it. In the first couple of years, I was your weekend hunter.
Mm-hmm.
During the rifle season, I might get to hunt 2 weekends or something. Mm-hmm. Kentucky's rifle season's right there at the rut, which I guess is decent for the rifle hunters.
Right. Good for them, bad for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I'd taken a few deer, and every season, I got a little more involved, and then I remember, I think it was like 2009. I shot a buck, and I didn't have that like surge of, the heart wasn't racing. I didn't have that like a big adrenaline dump and things like that. After I shot it, and I thought, I really like this sport. So I'm going to have to switch to a weapon that's going to provide a little more of a challenge, something a little more exciting. I want to get up close and personal. I want to continue to push myself, and learn more about this. So, and I think you see that a lot in not taking anything away from shotgun or rifle hunters. But I think on an average, if a guy is a bow hunter or he's really into archery hunting, he's also more involved with property management and things like that. And I just think it's something that's kind of synonymous, in the sport. But so I switched over to archery and started getting more involved in, the food plot and studying deer and management and picking out, certain deer that I wanted to kind of target or I wanted to chase that season. And it just, man, I'm telling you, best drug out there, hands down.
Yeah, man, I'd 100% agree with that. It's interesting because I grew up here, here in Pennsylvania. We had a ton of deer growing up. I lived out in the middle of nowhere, and my dad was a deer hunter, and he hunted a little bit of bow. I went bow hunting with him once. He just kind of wanted to show me what it was about. And my dad shoots a traditional bow. He didn't start shooting a compound until this past year. I got him to start shooting a compound so we could start archery hunting together. But it was predominantly.
Your dad was stud.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a pretty good shot too, man. Like truth be told, my first year archery hunting, I actually took a traditional bow out with me, and that was what I practiced with, and that was what I knew how to shoot before I knew how to shoot a compound. And it was interesting. Like I shot, kind of the same thing where it's like I hunted deer with a rifle, and I took a couple when I was a kid, and then I went away to school, went to college, and I didn't get to really hunt much during that time because I didn't really have any break like over the hunting season or whatever. And then, fast forward that, and I moved to Orlando, and I was a musician for, the better part of a decade. And, so I wasn't home a whole lot and stuff like that. And so I didn't get to hunt much. I did take one trip to Alaska, to one like a bear and a black-tailed deer hunt with my dad. And then, yeah. And then I ended up moving back to Pennsylvania once I kind of was done doing the music thing, and my wife and I wanted to move back home to be closer to family. And I started deer hunting again with a rifle at first, and I started, I always turkey hunted and rabbit hunted and stuff like that growing up, small game. And so I got back into that when I got back up here. And I went out on a turkey season. You mentioned you had, there was always like a tater. Like I have a buddy Tater. He's an older fella. He's pretty close to my dad's age. Like, he's, I guess, late 50s, Tater is. And he always hunts with my father-in-law, and we have a cabin and 200 and some odd acres down there, and it was fall turkey, and I'd always go down and turkey hunt with those guys, and it was usually just a reason to go down and have some drinks. And I got I had one too many that evening before the first morning of fall turkey. And our turkey season, like a lot of places, kind of yeah, I know, right? It happens to the best of us. And The two seasons, archery season, of course, and fall turkey kind of run together. And none of that group at that time was bow hunting except Tater. Tater always bow hunted, but because it was kind of earlier in October, he would take that weekend and kind of come hunt turkey with us that day. And so I got up that next morning, had way too much of your home state spirit of some bourbon, and managed to, get my shotgun and get my orange on, because I had to wear some orange during that part of the season. And I get down in the woods, and I didn't even put anything camo on. I literally had like a flannel shirt on, a pair of jeans, and like whatever shoes that were in the bottom of the cabin to put on. Walked out into the woods. I was so horribly hungover. I found the softest piece of moss that I could find, and I laid down and fell asleep at 0 dark 30. It's barely daylight out at this point. I wake up at 11:30 on the ground. I'm kind of like, where am I at? What is going on? And I look around and I hear all this kind of rustling going on. And I kind of sit up and I look down in this this hollow below me. And here are these 3 bucks chasing this doe around. Now at this point, I really didn't understand what was happening, but I just sat there and watched them for 20 minutes, run this doe around all over the place. That ended, and I felt horrible. So I was like, my day's over. I'm going back to the cabin and passing out. I get back there, and I was talking to Tater later, and I was like, I passed out. I told him what happened, and I was like, and I woke up, and I was like, there were 3 bucks chasing this doe around, and he was like, you, my friend, were witnessing some pre-rut. And I was like, really? He was like, that's natural deer movement. And it never really dawned on me growing up because I never archery hunted. The only movement I was ever used to seeing was typical, gun season movement, which is deer running scared for their life, essentially. You know what I mean? It's put yourself in front of the best cover, and every deer in the area is going to run to that. So you'll see something at some point. And that was really what kind of tickled my fancy for archery season. And then from there on, it was the next year I went out, and to what you said earlier, it's the best drug you could ever find, man. It's I've been hooked ever since. And now I traded my music obsession essentially for an archery obsession.
Yeah. It's, it's funny because with my kids, I talk about deer hunting all the time, around the house, and the same as I remember exactly what I felt the day they were born. I remember exactly where I was, what tree stand I was in when I heard my first buck grunt. Oh, yeah. And, it's just, I love the outdoors, and I have so much respect for the animals, and they're just super cool. This past season, a buddy of mine, Ben Royce, came down, and he was actually running a camera for me. It was super awesome to come down for a few days. And there was one buck that came in, really, really nice deer. Awesome deer. And to me, I just kept looking at him, and I thought, man, he's a great buck. He has a great, great rack. But he's a 3-year-old deer. And because he has such an impressive rack as a 3-year-old, he's a deer that I want to let go. I want him to reach his full potential. I want to see what he can become. And we, ultimately decided to pass him, and we got great footage of him. It was a cool encounter. And I think that's what, every day that I went out, I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish,
Yeah.
And I got to learn more of the terrain, and I got to see deer movement. I got to study deer, and I did draw back on him. If nothing else for practice, but ultimately decided it's not a deer that I wanted to take. So I let down. And when I was shed hunting this year, I actually picked up, I found this deer's dead head, that I called my DNR officer and got a salvage tag. But, it was man. And truth be told, his rack is way bigger than what I actually thought it was at that time. I still wouldn't have shot him because to me, he was a 3-year-old and I wasn't going to shoot him. But he's sporting a 20-inch inside spread. Pretty solid deer.
Right.
So no clue what happened to him, but
that's a bummer. That good that you found the rack. I think because you had a little bit of history with him, but it's a bummer that he's not going to be there to chase around. But hey, it's one of those things where it's that's nature. She's a cruel mistress sometimes. You know what I mean? And, it's just nice that what I said when I got back from my Ohio trip, what I had experienced out there as far as the rut and so forth, was that I was just very much appreciative that I had a great stand set up where I was bulletproof in that set. There was nothing winding me. There was nothing seeing me. I had great breakup. I had deer right underneath my stand. And I could have not gotten anything on that trip, and I would have came back a happy man, because it was just, they allowed me to kind of step foot into their world for a couple of days and experience what they do on a regular basis. And so just from that perspective, I was grateful. And, I could have came out of that hunt with, and ate a tag and would have been just as happy. But to change gears here, really quickly, I know we were kind of talking about, all the things that you're involved in, and we're similar in this way, where it's like, a rolling stone gathers no moss. So I'm always into something. Yeah. And that was the one thing when we were in Harrisburg that I kind of, noticed right away. I was like, this is a guy that just, has his hands in a lot of things and likes to be busy and just likes to make things and be productive. So the one thing I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, is the Wicked Tree Gear, company and the product. Cause, truth be told, I've used other hand saws in the past, and I've literally broken every one of them. So I have finally picked up a Wicked Tree Gear, hand saw. And I'm looking forward to trimming some lanes with it this year. But I wanted to get, especially with your background in horticulture and working for Wicked Tree, and your background in the whitetail woods and stuff, I wanted to get your thoughts on just some best practices or tips for whenever people are clearing lanes. Because, this is a time of year where I would imagine folks are kind of going out and checking out, some of their stand setups without foliage on the trees to kind of get a good view as to what they're trimming away. So if you could just kind of give us your hit list of what are some of the best practices for trimming lanes.
Yeah. So, when I get to go out and do a little bit of shed hunting, it's hard for me because half the time I'm looking down at the ground, but half the time I'm looking up,
right.
And I'll step over a shed. My buddy's like, "Oh, I found one. Where? In between your legs."
I have a hard time believing that, considering I saw that picture of you when you went out for an hour and stumbled across 7. So,
yeah. I've been scooping them up pretty good this year. I'm not gonna lie, it's been my best year. But I've missed a few because I'll be staring up into the distance and I'm looking, I'm like, wow, look at that ridge, and that leads right down here, and there's a big steep ravine, so I know they're not going to cross that. They're going to have to loop around there. I'm like, okay, where is the best advantage point to come in? So, I'm always looking at that kind of stuff, but I think when I'm picking trees that I want to hunt out of and shooting lanes, if you have easy access and it's a stand that you can go to often without potentially smoking it out, those are the stands that I'll try to hang in the summer, and I'll get in there and I'll trim them out and make big, huge shooting lanes and things like that, to where maybe I can have a longer lane to keep myself from having to go all the way into that core spot, to hunt the edges a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then, for stands that I want to run and gun in, those are the stands that, for me, I want to save those. And I might trim a couple of things, but I'm not going to put a stand up yet. I might trim some of those things that are a little further away from my stand. But the stuff that's right in that tree, I'll do that the day of, while I'm hanging that set. But those are your stands that that you can't smoke them out. If you go in there too much, you're going to burn them out. So I'll kind of save those spots for those run and guns. And usually those run and guns are pre-rut, rut, post-rut, when you can kind of get away with a little bit more. The deer are a little more forgiving, where you can kind of roll the dice and take that chance because they are moving around so much. And they might not pay attention to you if they're, paying a little closer attention to a cute little doe that just ran by them or something like that. But I love cutting more pockets than anything, and if I can, and we all know that there's those tree stand setups where you can't always do this, but I try to imagine like a 5-point star. I want to give myself at least 5 options to shoot from, or 5 holes, or potentially 5 lanes. Now, a lane for me is not I-75 interstate going
right.
from Florida to Michigan, That's
right,
not what I'm trying to do. Thread the needle. And like I said, and that's why a lot of times I'll just call them pockets.
Right.
Give myself a little pocket to shoot into. But I think I don't so much pick the tree as I pick the location. And I think that's another thing a lot of guys will do is they'll say, oh, look at this tree. It's super straight. It's a beefy tree. And it would be easy to get a tree stand in there.
Right.
And that's, I don't look at it that way. I look at where do I need to be to give myself that advantage over that deer. And a lot of times, more often than not, the tree stands that I end up choosing and the reasons why I choose them, it ends up being a type of deal where, think about if you took a whole pie, just comes out of the oven, and you slice one little piece. Now, remember I was telling you I had my buddy that we called Tiny. Right. He was a really big fella. Right. I'm not talking about tiny slice of pie. I mean like a legitimate near you slice of pie.
Right.
So a lot of times it's kind of like slicing the pie. I get myself right at that verge of where that buck still feels like he's in control and he's able to smell everything. But I'm just right. I'm teetering on that edge to where he might be able to bust me. I put myself in those situations. It seems like a lot, and like I said, I want him to be as relaxed as he possibly can. And obviously, like a lot of us do, I'll have a stand for a northwest wind. I'll have a stand for an east wind. I'll have a stand for a south wind.
Right.
And I try to give myself options because I don't want to have a south wind and then have a free day to go hunt and then go, oh crap, I don't have any place to go.
Right.
So I try to give myself all the different wind choices. And like I said, I look at natural funnels, pinch points and ridges and things like that. Ridges I like more in the rut. And, again, same thing with shed hunting. It's a great opportunity because you're getting to see the woods, but the woods is going to, basically what it's going to look like, come fall when the leaves start falling. So, and that changes things. When I moved to Iowa this past year, it was May 1 and everything was leafed out at that point. And I didn't get to see, topo maps are great and they're a great tool and I use them and I study them religiously, but there's something to be said for putting, boots on the ground as well and seeing that stuff.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's like, for me, it's always good to kind of look at that aerial and like the topography features, but it's like, just the way I learn, like I'm a doer, seer, feeler, you know what I mean? Experienced person where it's
sure.
like, until I get there, see it, touch it and kind of, and look at it and kind of, experience it, I guess it doesn't completely sink in for me. So I'm definitely a boots on the ground kind of guy. Now, if you can kind of control the situation or control the day that you're going to kind of go out and hang stands or do some trimming, do you prefer to kind of do it on days where you're going to get a little bit of rain? Are you really kind of concerned with scent? I mean, I know that your run and gun sets, you're really kind of being really mindful as to when you're going to go in and trim anything out.
Sure.
You're really going to kind of do that the day of, but the places where you're hanging things in advance, are you kind of, being cautious and like removing any of the debris that you cut out, or are you just mainly going to do it early enough to where you can kind of let it set and the deer will kind of get used to whatever happened there?
Yeah, if I'm, especially some of the earlier sets, if I start hanging some stuff in like July, I don't pay too much attention. I mean, I'm not in there trying to run chainsaws or anything.
Right.
But at the same token, I'm not too concerned about what I'm disturbing. I'm not looking to spend 3 or 4 hours in a particular area if I don't have to. So I do want to get in and get out, but I don't pay too much to mind if it's that early in the year. If I know that I have rain coming, that's a plus for me, but it's not a deal breaker necessarily. I still have a full daytime job, so unfortunately, I don't get to completely dictate, what day, hey, I'm going to go hang tree stands every day this week for the next month.
Right.
I kind of have to work around my work schedule like a lot of us do,
Right, well, hey,
and so I have that luxury.
When you figure out that plan, you let me know what that plan is. I'll come hang tree stands with you.
I'm waiting for Ed McMahon to show up with balloons and stuff like that and tell me I just won that Publishers Clearinghouse. But,
I know, right? I always see that post on Facebook where someone's like, the Powerball is $1.5 billion or whatever. What state are you buying hunting land in first? And the sad thing is I will legitimately spend an hour of my day thinking about that and make a list.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But, and then as the season gets closer, that's when I'm really mindful of wind. Extremely windy days, I really like those if it's getting really close to the season and I might be bumping some of those patternable deer. I'll try to go on days where it's a little windier and at least that's making a little bit of noise, especially if I know the wind's blowing in the direction that I want it to be blowing into.
Right.
For sure.
So I've checked out, a couple of your videos. I know that you are doing some things. You have a new, or I don't know if I won't say necessarily new, but a newer endeavor with the Arrow Wild company. Can you talk a little bit about what that venture is? How it came about, and what that's all about.
Basically, once I broke away from White Knuckle, several of the guys that were on White Knuckle had approached me and they said, "Hey, what are your plans?" And I said, "I think I'm just going to stick to photography and short films." And at this point, I had produced two short films so far. One was a short film about my father. It was called Work More Hours. And then the other one is one that's called 12 Months. And nobody has seen that yet. It potentially may show up on Hunting Film Tour. I sent it in to them for submission, and I'm fingers crossed that it gets picked up.
Nice, man. I hope so.
If it doesn't, man, thank you. And if it doesn't, then I'll ultimately post it up on Arrow Wild, and I'll probably put it on my personal pages. But it's basically a story about me leaving law enforcement and leaving Kentucky and saying, okay, for the next 12 months, I'm going to kind of reinvent myself. And, whatever I become on the outside at the end of that 12 months, then that's me.
Right.
So, not quite like a 12-step program or anything like that, but it just, I figured it would take me 12 months to kind of settle into the new area and settle into the new career and the new state and that kind of thing. But, and kind of push myself to do things I haven't done. But Arrow Wild Company basically evolved from a lot of buddies. They approached me and they said, "Look, if you ever want to do another web show, we want to keep filming and we want to keep sharing our stories. So I'd be down, if you want to do it." So that's kind of how it started. And I went back to those guys and I said, I really did enjoy the web show stuff. And if you guys want to do it, then let's rock and roll. If you guys are committed to it, and then we'll make it happen. So we started basically partnering up with companies of, products of things that we were already using to begin with, or companies that we had been using their products, just had never done anything official with them. Right. So Arrow Wild came out as a web show. We do a lot of, with social media, the way it is, a lot of these manufacturers they're being forced basically to put a lot more content out there. The days of doing one post a week as a manufacturer, you can't get by with that anymore. Right. A post a day, 2 posts a day and things. So we structured Arrow Wild to work with different manufacturers to provide photography for their social media outlets. We are doing our web shows. We do have some packages that we've done that we're going to be doing some kind of tips and tricks. And it's not like, this is how you have to use this product. It's, hey, here's a way that we use it. Try it. It might work for you. Everybody's got their own system. So we're not telling you this is the way, this is a way. Right. And then we're doing some interactive posts. So we'll have a piece where it's kind of the interactive, share a story of how, your prime bow, you were successful, on your hunt with your prime bow, or tell us an experience to where you went undetected in the woods, with your Sitka gear. And then we'll feature those, on our page and kind of give other people some credit, because I'm not a professional hunter. Right. And the guys on my team, we're not professional hunters. We're guys that like to film and share our stories. And so, it gives everybody a chance to kind of contribute to it a little bit and kind of back up what we're saying. Hey, this is a great product. And manufacturers, it's good for them, and it's good for the hunting industry. And who doesn't like to kind of get their name in the paper a little bit, and get to share in their harvest, successful hunt that they had.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I like the approach just from the sense of, I always kind of gravitate to the more organic type of content, if that's the right way to,
Mm-hmm.
if that's the right way to say it, lower production. Sure. I mean, I was even that way in the music industry, where I always kind of gravitated toward the records that were just raw and it sounded like you were sitting in a room listening to them play. It's kind of the same way for me hunting,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like I kind of prefer to see those hunts where it's like I'm getting that raw experience, the raw emotion, the showing me all the warts, because a lot of times it's like I'm as interested in the warts of the hunt or the things that went wrong as I am as of the things that went right in many ways. It just kind of makes for a well-rounded story, and I think more important than anything is that it's an honest story, right? And I think that that's somewhat what the big production kind of hunting shows kind of start to get away from a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like I just want to see. It's like every time you go out, you see a 180-inch deer and you killed it at the end of the show. You know what I mean? It's like that's not every man's land. You know what I mean? Every man's land is that I sat for 21 days in a tree stand and I saw one shooter and a bunch of does and I got my spot blown up 10 times. You know what I mean? Like that's more the norm. You know what I mean? It's so it's refreshing to kind of see that type of stuff. And I'm definitely going to, be on the lookout for what you're putting out. Cause I after we met and you kind of mentioned it to me, I got a chance to check it out and I liked what you guys were doing. I've been kind of following and waiting for some new videos to come out, of course, for this next upcoming hunting season. But so kind of speaking of this next upcoming hunting season, do you have any plans for any adventure hunts this year, or what are your hunting plans for this year?
This year for spring turkey, I'll be hunting here in Iowa and just start the season, and then I'm going to break away and I want to head back to my old Kentucky home and hunt some gobblers down there with my buddy Mike Riddle. And it's a special hunt because we only get to hunt together, once a year now, whereas we used to sit in a ground blind or in a tree stand together for 3.5 months,
Right.
Our wives, they're like, what do you like? You just like, is that your new boyfriend or girlfriend but, so it's super cool to go back to Kentucky and hunt with him. And, my buddy Johnny Parker, one of the nicest guys in the world. He lets me hunt birds out there. And, for deer, I'll start off my season in Missouri. I'm not far from Missouri at all.
Nice.
20 minutes, and I'm at the hunting spot in Missouri, and then I'll come back and focus. Before I come back to Iowa, I'm actually going to head to Montana. I'll be in Montana and going to be doing antelope, spot and stalk with archery there.
Nice.
And then when I come back to Iowa, it'll be October 1, and that's where I'll stay. I'll grind out the whole season here.
Nice, man. That's awesome. Yeah. When are you going to be in Montana? What part of the year?
It's probably, I'm on the calendar. I'm kind of trying to pinpoint around like September 15th, 18th, something like that. Try to head out that way. Nice. And do 4 or 5 days out there.
Nice. Yeah, I'll be there September 9th through the 22nd, I think, is my trip.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I should be out there while you're there. What part of the state?
We are going to be, it is going to be near Dillon is where we'll be at.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we got a buddy.
I'm going to be down around. Oh, you okay?
Yeah,
so you've got a spot.
Yeah, I have a buddy and my cousin have been going out to the same spot for, I want to say like 5 years. They've taken some decent bulls out there, and actually one of our friends from back home lives in Montana and works for the forestry agency. And so part of his job is he does. Last time I ran into him back home, one of the things he had recently kind of wrapped up was that he was finishing a report on an elk calving habitat enhancement that he got a grant for, and then he, however many years ago, so he doesn't know where any of the elk are at, of course. So he's got a pretty sweet, a couple pretty sweet little honey holes on public ground that are kind of off the beaten path, difficult to get to.
Yeah.
Which is why we've been texting back and forth or talking back and forth about some of the training I've been doing. These dudes are. They're workout dudes. So I work out and train to stay in shape and just be healthy. These guys are like next level. And, I'm kind of like, training that way I don't have to like hold on to the holy shit bar the whole time we're hunting together as they're running up and down the mountains.
Yeah. They're not going, come on, Clint, hurry up.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. Well, the other thing is too, man, it's like I'm not getting any younger, and these guys are all, probably like 7-8 years my junior for the most part, except my cousin. He's 3 years younger than me. So I'm like, these dudes are in shape, like more in shape than I am, and or like 10, like almost 10 years younger than me. I was like, I got to try to keep up so they're not bagging on the old man the whole time we're out there, because that's just going to hurt the ego if that happens.
That's funny. Yeah. I tell you, it's funny, because it's I turned 39 a week ago or 2 weeks ago, something like that, and you don't recover as fast as you did before. It takes a little bit of work. I used to be able to eat a cake and not gain a pound. Now I can be in the same room as a cake and I gain 4 pounds. So it is different. But I'll be doing that tonight.
Nice. Yeah.
I'll be heading off to the gym, and I try to at least get it 4 nights a week. That's my goal.
That's good.
Got to do it,
Yeah, you got to, man. It's mine is. I'm an early guy. It's like I got to get mine in the morning, first thing when I wake up, and that's I'm kind of neurotic about. I'm neurotic about a lot of things. Like that's hunting is one of those things where I'm neurotic about. Working out is one of those other things where it's I have to try to get in 6 days a week. Otherwise, it's like I'm angry at myself if I don't get like 6 days in. But
sure.
we'll see how I fare here in September. I'll give you a full detailed report, of course, but. Speaking of wanting to get you off to the gym here, man, I want to make sure you get your workout in. We'll kind of wrap things up here, but I wanted to ask you just a couple questions here, because I know I'm always interested in what type of gear people are using, what types of things they're comfortable with and stuff like that. So I just kind of want to get a sense of, what bow are you shooting, and what are some of the accessories you're using, what type of sight are you using, release, and those types of things.
So I'm shooting the Prime Archery, the new Synergy, and I'm using a Spot Hog. I use the Hoggett sight, 5-pin. I might put the Fast Eddy back on the bow when I go out for antelope, just to have that distance option with the single pin and dial it down. Right. Because I set my sights 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Right. And last year, if it's any indication, then I'm going to want to make sure I can reach out and touch 80 and 70 and stuff like that. So, release, let's see. Well, I use a Stokerized, the SS1 stabilizer. I really like that, having it kind of tuck in beside the bow. Mm-hmm. And I like it a little more compact, and it works real well for me. I use a True Fire, chicken wing is what I've been using here lately. I'm a wrist guy. I've tried the back tension, and after busting my mouth open like 5 times, I just said, you know what, it's not for me. It's too much to be thinking about.
The back was kind of the teeth were loose, huh?
Yeah. For me, it's like when I go to draw, my eyes are on that deer, and I'm studying that deer's body language at all times. And the last thing I'm thinking about is where, can I pull off the back tension and whatnot. So I just like the wrist release, and but it's the single fang, style caliper, and I like that. It seems to be a little more consistent for me, and it helps me hit my anchor a little bit better and stuff. But shooting Black Eagle arrows, and with G5 broadheads. As of right now, I've got the 2-blade Havocs, but I'll probably switch over to that dead meat once those are available. Mm-hmm. And rocking Sitka gear. Love Sitka gear. It's just the textile, the fit, the pattern, the Gore-Tex, the warranty. And it's funny too, like when I was a kid, the coolest car was a Lamborghini. I don't know anything about Lamborghini as a company. It was just a Countach. It was the coolest car in the world, right? Right. And once you you get a little bit older and you start to identify like what these companies stand for and what they represent, and the lifestyle, the brand lifestyle that they create. And I just have so much respect for the guys and girls over at Sitka Gear. it's just really cool to be a part of that deal with them. Let's see, covert trail cameras. Love Mrs. Dopey right here in Southeast Iowa. Sam makes like the absolute purest, awesome, the best. Well, he doesn't make it. I mean, he's just capturing it. There's
right. I was gonna say if he's making it,
what it is. Yeah, no. I mean, he's not making it. It's the purest, thing out there. Luminox, love the Luminox, the lighted Nox, and I'm always rocking Lone Wolf tree stands.
Nice.
Those are some of the companies that I do some work with, and I know there's people that I'm leaving out that I should probably mention. Big and J. I love their BB squared. It's just an excellent feed. I don't hunt over bait, and it's not allowed in Iowa anyways, but because of the whole conservation and the hunting thing, like I love being able to feed those deer a little extra, help them out a little bit in the winter, and it boosts a healthier herd and things like that. So, why not? Give them a little hand, especially with lactating does and stuff like that. I mean, that's what you want is your healthiest herd you can possibly have.
Right. Man, that's awesome. Yeah, the what you mentioned about Sitka there for a second, just in terms of how there's so many of these companies you grow up that you don't really know anything about, and I think it's really important for the hunting community specifically to know who you're supporting. In the long run, making sure that they kind of have for lack of a better way to put it, kind of putting their money where their mouth is. You know what I mean? Sitka is one of those companies that support all the things that Hunter and people that support public land and public places and stuff like that. They're doing all the right things. They say the right things and they back it up with their actions. And the gear is second to none. And they're just from my experience that I've had, which has been brief with them, has been top notch. So I'll echo those sentiments. Man, I think that's it, man. I want to get you off to the gym. I want to make sure whenever you get out to the western part of the country, man, you can hoof those mountains. I don't want to be the downfall to your preparation, man. So I think with that being said, why don't you just kind of give the folks out there listening some places where they can kind of check out more about Johnny Utah / Mulligan and the things he's got going on in his world.
Sure. Instagram, Johnny Utah Mulligan is my Instagram account, and I try to stay pretty active and share some adventure photos and stuff like that on there, and definitely want to build up my Instagram following as much as possible. And then on Facebook, Arrow Wild Co. For standing for Arrow Wild Company. That is our Facebook page. We also have an Instagram page there that I actually just started up on that. And we're working on the website, and we'll be launching some apparel, shirts and hats and stickers and stuff like that with the Arrow Wild branding on it. And please check us out. Give us a like, give us a share, give us a follow. Tell people about us if you can. It's huge. It helps us out, and it allows us to continue sharing stories. And if anybody ever wants to reach out, please do. I'm very, very responsive on messages. If there's something you want to see or something that you want shown more in depth, I have a problem telling people no. You would think as a cop it'd be easy for me to do, but in the cop world it was easy to say no. But like when it comes to something that you're truly passionate about, I love it to death, and I love all aspects of it. And even if somebody has a question, I can still learn something from their question,
Right.
So yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, hey,
I see you, man.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you coming on and some great stories. And I'm sure we'll be running into each other again here soon at some point, and definitely have you back on to share some more stories after this hunting season.
Cool, man. Thank you very much for having me, brother.
All right, brother. You take care. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. Just want to thank John for joining us. Be sure to check out Wicked Tree Gear at wickedtreegear.com, and make sure to give John a follow at Arrow Wild Company on Facebook and Instagram. I'll be sure to place the links to both of those social media properties in the blog post show notes. And since I've kept everyone waiting long enough, I'll announce the winner of the Exes trail camera giveaway now. The winner of today's giveaway is Kenny Richmond. So congratulations to Kenny. I'll be in touch via social media to get your mailing address and get this camera out to you as soon as possible. Also, as a reminder, Exodus will have a new Mark II lift camera that will be coming out soon, so be on the lookout for that. And if you're picking up a new camera, be sure to use the promo code TRUTH for a 10% discount on Exodus trail camera purchases. The folks at Exodus are kind enough to hook up the Truth from the Stand listeners and followers with a bit of a discount on their site. But before I get out of here, I just want to be sure to thank all of you for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher, and you can also listen to us, of course, on Google Play. And it would be awesome if you would all go over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star iTunes rating. We'd really appreciate it. And finally, I need to give a big shout out to our partners at Whitetail Institute of North America, Exes Outdoor Gear, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands for helping us make this podcast happen. And until next time, we'll see y'all.